northeast of San Francisco, a town of about 130,000 people. Kathleen Rogneby has been out all day with her two children. They've been shopping. All of a sudden, she hears her daughter Amia screaming.
Mom, what is going on?
And her son looks at her with a straggle look in his face and says, Mom, there's blood everywhere.
Stay right there. Oh my God.
Kathleen runs out of the house and calls 911 hysterically.
What's the emergency? Oh my God, my cousin, he's laying on the floor in blood. Is he alive? I don't know. Okay, do you feel like you can go in there and help him? No, I don't want to go in there. I don't want to go in there. The officers are driving there as fast as they can, okay? I'm scared. What do I do?
Kathleen is too upset to realize what's happened to her husband, and when she finds out, she's going to be even more upset. I spent my career closing murder cases, but I'm not the only one who answered the call. It takes a rare breed to solve the unsolvable, to catch a ruthless killer, to find justice for the dead. That's what it takes to be an American detective.
I was across town when my call sign came up over the air and they were sending me to a medical call, and there wasn't a whole lot of details in there.
Ma'am, what's going on?
The family was outside. No one wanted any part with going into the house. Thinking to myself, like, what am I walking into? I walk into the front door.
Mr. Eastman?
I go to turn into the kitchen and I see the victim.
Jesus.
And there's this just huge pool of coagulated blood all around his head. And I can hear him breathe just slightly.
We got you. Hang in there, buddy.
They send EMTs to the home, assuming it is an accidental fall.
He must have hit his head on the counter or something.
I'm kind of looking around and I'm wondering, how did he get this? Did he have some type of medical emergency and he hit the tip of the counter? I'm trying to make sense of what's going on, and at some point I remember their medical personnel said, we're going to transport him. So I went to grab him by his feet, and as we picked him up on the inside part of his shirt where his back was,
Hold up.
I saw something. I'm like, there's no way. And I take a closer look at it and go, that's a bullet fragment.
Everyone stops. This is no accident.
And as he's being transported to the hospital, I got on the radio and asked for whoever else is available to come down here, because this is now an active crime scene.
Calling take one. My name is Corporal James Colley. In 2016, I was working for the Antioch Police Department, assigned to the Investigations Bureau as a homicide detective. Being a detective, you're always on call. And anytime my phone went off in the middle of the night, I knew exactly what it was for. There's never confusion about what it means.
Gonzalez?
I partnered with Detective Gonzalez on this.
My name is Adrian Gonzalez. I'm a corporal with the Antioch Police Department, and this was the first time I would be on the lead team.
Adrian, at the time, was a newer detective working property crime. I saw some potential in some of the work that he'd been doing, and I wanted to start getting his feet wet in the violent crime, homicide world.
Okay, everybody, listen up. Here's what we got.
We were told that the victim was a white male. His name was Rellis Eastman.
We found out Rellis had suffered a gunshot wound to the back of his head. He was alive, but historically speaking, if you're shot in the back of the head, it's probably going to turn into a homicide at some point.
Detective? Officer Ramirez, what are we looking at?
We've got a Caucasian male found.
So Detective Colley arrives at this crime scene and meets Officer Ramirez of the Uniform Division, who is the person that called for their assistance.
I did the walkthrough with them. We made our way back into the kitchen. And I explained to them exactly how the victim was when I got there.
The entire kitchen was covered in blood, to the extent of there was even some brain matter on the floor from where he'd been shot. Relis Eastman got shot right in the threshold of the door that leads from the garage into the kitchen.
So Colley assumes that Relis Eastman was moving from the garage to the kitchen. He opens the door, he takes a gunshot wound to the head, it splatters some brain tissue and some blood on the door.
I was imagining where the shooter would have been standing. And that kind of gives you an indication of how a bullet was fired and where it was fired from.
If more than one shot was fired, it more than likely went towards the living room.
I remember Detective Colley kind of starts walking around, was kind of taking the scene, and there was a TV that was hanging on the wall, and the TV screen was cracked. And he goes,
There's a bullet hole in this TV.
The bullet in the TV was interesting because you could tell it was a straight-on bullet hole. It didn't look like it had hit something and maybe skipped.
I remember saying, that looks like a 22, just because it's such a small bullet.
We honestly didn't know what to make of that. 22s are usually target practice guns. You can shoot small rodents with it, I guess. But to see that the murder happened with a 22, it was unique.
So Colley begins as all homicide investigations begin. He doesn't know what happened, but he's thinking what could have happened here.
We started throwing around some ideas that it may have been some type of home invasion or a botched burglary. Those are not uncommon in Antioch. Antioch, it's a six-bedroom community, but Antioch has a lot of crime out here. A few years ago, we were voted the third or fourth most dangerous city in California.
The street where Relis lived at, it's a pretty quiet neighborhood, but it's surrounded by some streets that are a little bit more notorious in the Bay Area for, drugs and shootings and homicides.
Let's look around a little more.
Could this be a home invasion that goes suddenly wrong when there is a homeowner present and shots are fired? Is that possible? Of course it is.
But there was nothing that stood out that would have been an easy guess for us.
The house doesn't indicate anybody rifling through things, turning over furniture, or emptying drawers.
None of the doors had been kicked in. None of the windows appeared tampered with. And so either this was somebody that Relis knew, maybe somebody that Relis trusted, somebody that was able to get close enough to him and shoot him execution style in the back of the head. We didn't know who to suspect, but we knew it was self and what Relis may have been up to or something that he was involved in, because obviously something had led back to his house where he had been murdered.
Who are you, Relis Eastman, and why would somebody want to remove you from this earth? Detective Colley thinks the shooting of Relis Eastman is personal, but nothing at the scene really points to any particular individual as being responsible. So they go back outside to see what else they can find that might be of some assistance.
And so they started walking the perimeter of the house.
Check this out.
So they find a backpack. Well, what's that doing there?
Let's see what we got in here.
The backpack had some clothing items. There was a wallet, and inside that wallet was the driver's license of Relis' oldest son, Scott Eastman.
Not more.
There was some marijuana and a pipe for it.
So now Colley's left with some thoughts. What if Scott's taste for narcotics has brought an element of danger to that family?
All I put it all in there. Let's bag it up for evidence.
So Collie decides at the scene that he's learned what he can, which isn't much. He has a little bit. He needs a ton more.
If I have nowhere to go, I start looking into the victims themselves.
The people that have the best information about this victim are the family members. And of course, all these people are at the hospital at the bedside of the victim.
Relish was in the intensive care unit. He was unresponsive. He was connected to monitors, and he had a breathing tube to assist to keep his lungs going.
I just sat there and I held my dad's hand for a few minutes and contemplated on if he was actually going to come home to us. Because every little girl wants her dad to come home.
Relish grew up on a farm in the farmland in the heart of Kansas. So he was a Kansas farm boy. And he had joined the U.S. Army fresh out of high school. Later on, Relish worked for a major telecommunications company.
My dad was a workaholic, supported my mom and 5 kids.
Relish Eastman was trying really, really hard to scrape out an honest living and keep his kids on track in an area where you're pretty much surrounded by horrible influences growing up.
Marijuana was not something he was okay with having in the house or around us kids. Hang in there, Dad.
At this point, police were sort of standing by to treat this as a homicide investigation.
You want to ask the son about the drugs?
Yeah, I do.
Start with the wife, though.
Interviewing his wife, that's the quickest way to learn something about your victim.
The wife is always the closest to the victim, emotionally and often physically. So he talks to Kathleen Rognaby.
Kathleen, what can you tell us about your husband? I mean, how's the family dynamic?
We've got 5 kids in total.
We learned that they had 3 girls in common. And then from a previous marriage, Scott is Relish's son. Kathleen is his stepmom. And then there was a little boy. I believe he was 6 or 7 at the time.
How about your relationship with Relish?
Honestly, it's not great.
Relish and Kathleen were having marital problems. They were estranged, but they still lived together up until the time he was shot.
They sleep in separate rooms. They are going to organize themselves in a manner that they can then get a divorce.
I hate to say this, but he was just not a great husband.
Kathleen kind of wanted to paint Relish as kind of like a lech. Like he was always cheating, and he had all these women on the side.
That raises an eyebrow and is somewhat alarming to Collie.
We even threw around the idea that this could have been maybe a jealous husband or something that shot him.
So they finish with Kathleen Rognaby. They move to Scott, the 21-year-old son of Relish Eastman.
Scott, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Whatever you need.
Scott kind of came off very unassuming. He was a kind of short, very scrawny kid. He spoke in a really weird cadence. He didn't really make eye contact.
He gets the feeling and drift from the conversation that Scott is not the sharpest knife in the drawer.
Look, we found something outside the house we were hoping you could help us out with.
Challenged him about why your backpack was in the backyard.
Scott admits, I use marijuana. I leave it outside the house so I don't have a confrontation with my dad.
Scott said that he kind of had a strained relationship with his father. But he did say that he got along much better with his stepmom.
Scott, do you owe people money for drugs or anything like that?
No, I just smoke every now and then, that's all.
Talking to Scott, his low-level marijuana use, we didn't really see that as any type of link that would have gotten Relish friends. And he described that he was with 2 of his buddies.
And they were playing video games, which is his routine. He often does this.
Scott said that he had been with these friends for the entire night, but he left for a short time. Relish would get upset when Scott drove at night, so Scott had to bring the car back.
Did you see your dad?
No,
Scott told us that he parked a block away and then walked back to his friend's house. because he knew that if Dad saw him, that he would make him come into the house and he wouldn't be allowed to go play with his friends.
I get that, Scott. So my old man was strict too. Yo, we'll let you go on and get out of here, okay? All right.
They failed to get anywhere with the family as to what might be involved here. They decide to go in a different direction. They do a neighborhood follow-up, knocking and talking with the neighbors.
We wanted to see who had residential cameras, so we could maybe see who had been coming and going from the scene of the crime that night.
The world is under surveillance by the government or by your neighbor, but by someone.
Walking around that area, we found a couple of homes that looked like they had video cameras on them.
When he sees a camera, he stops and puts a business card on the door with a note saying, "Please call me, I'd like to see your footage regarding an incident." Smart.
Let's check this out. I just got something pretty interesting.
When Connor returns to his headquarters building, he is greeted by the ballistics report of the recovered slug. It is a .22 long rifle, and it's fired from a very unusual gun.
We got really lucky because our expert was able to link it up to an H&R 999 revolver.
An H&R Model 999 is a very antiquated revolver. The revolver breaks in half to get the spent casings out.
It is clear it came from a Harrington and Richardson revolver and from no other. So that's interesting.
This is Detective Conley.
Another big break that we had in this case is when I got a call from a social worker at the hospital where Relis was. The social worker had some concerns regarding the Eastman family, saying that they wanted Relis officially dead for a potential insurance payout.
So it turns out that the policy had a value of $1 million. So that gives someone a million reasons to remove Mr. Eastman from the planet.
You know, earlier today, I got a call from one of Relis' coworkers.
This coworker told us stories of how conniving Kathleen was and how she kind of manipulated all the situations in her and Relis' life.
Colley begins to learn that Kathleen Rognaby has been bleeding Relis dry for 10 years, has had numerous affairs with other men, even produced a child with another man, still lives under his roof, still has him pay all of her bills.
It really painted Kathleen in a different light. Because since the beginning, Kathleen put herself forward as the victim, as Relis is the one that had all the girlfriends. But in reality, it was actually flipped. That Relis was just a really good-hearted man that was walked over constantly by Kathleen.
Yeah, I think we need to talk to Kathleen again.
He realizes it's time to rethink Kathleen. So on the 30th of June, the medical staff in the ICU ward at the hospital informs the family that Relis Eastman is effectively brain dead.
I am racking my brain on what to do.
Sweetie, it's time.
And so my mom signed the papers to pull the plug.
Kathleen Rognaby makes the decision to end Relis Eastman's life. Now, is she within her rights to do that? Of course. But does she see $1 million in her future, and this is her motivation? Or does she want to stop the prolonged suffering of Relis Eastman? Which is it? One or the other? So when Colley gets that call about Kathleen being overly interested in the $1 million insurance policy, he brings in Kathleen Rognaby for further conversations.
I was really, at that point, looking at Kathleen as one of the main suspects. A lot of it was us calling her onto the carpet about certain things.
Basically, Kathleen Rognaby doesn't really say anything. I'm not responsible for this. I'm not involved in this. I didn't do anything.
Would you mind if we took a look at your phone?
We were pretty just blunt about it, like, hey, would you be willing to let us look through your phone to see if there's any evidence of this murder on it?
That's fine.
You could tell she was a little hesitant at first, but she gave over the phone,
She still wanted to play that I'm being cooperative, don't look at me as a suspect.
Sit tight. We'll bring her phone back in a minute.
Collie and I started to go through things like her messages and her phone calls.
And instantly what he found was interesting to us.
We find out she's having an affair. There was a thread with a male that was pretty obvious that was
other men.
That is truly interesting, but that's all it is.
I started to go through things like her searches. When it comes to your search history, it's going to show what you want, and like it's going to show your plans.
Okay, look.
We find out that she had been researching Relis's life insurance about 3 weeks before he got murdered.
She has a very strong interest in the money that's involved in his life insurance policy.
It starts to make it look like Kathleen could have motive to be a part of this murder.
Can you tell us what you were doing the day your husband got shot?
She was able to provide receipts, and she was with her children in other parts of the city when the shooting occurred.
I don't think you could ask for a better alibi. There's no way in any sense of the imagination that she could have possibly done this, unless she's got an identical twin running around somewhere.
Here's a thought. What if someone else was in on it?
Like the guy she was seeing on the side?
Maybe. But who would benefit most from an insurance bill? Your son?
I remember telling Detective Colley, I really don't see Scott as walking into a phone booth saying Shazam and becoming this murderer. He didn't seem to have that in him. But Colley and I discussed that there could be a scenario in which Kathleen and Scott had worked together on this.
So, what's going on here, Scott? We shall see.
Scott, we just want to go over what you were doing the night your father was murdered.
The problems that we started seeing with Scott during the second interview, he began adding stuff to his timeline and his whereabouts. He told me he had gone to a chain store to buy this huge box of condoms.
So you went for condoms. With what money?
The wallet was in the backyard. So then the question is, well, how are you going to pay for these condoms if you don't have any money?
I had gone to...
And that's really when he started kind of slipping. You could tell that he was making stuff up on the fly.
When you start making changes, my boy, you're digging yourself a grave.
It's absolutely attributed to Colley's interview tactics. He's someone that's going to ask you hard questions, and when he senses that you're lying, he's not going to leave that subject.
And out of nowhere, Scott tells us, oh, I exited out of the store that has the Echo ATM on that side. And I'll never forget, that really perked Detective Gonzalez's interest.
Working in property crimes, I knew what an Eco ATM was. It's an unmanned kiosk where you can sell your cell phone. And a lot of times when people have their phones stolen, it can end up in these kiosks.
Why would you randomly say...
Scott says he stopped and got a few things when he was out that evening. Did you get some cash too, Scott, out of a cell phone machine?
The look on his face was like a cornered cat that just got caught.
I don't even have a cell phone.
He said he doesn't have a cell phone because he lost it. What if he needs to lose that phone because of what's in it? What better place to do it than there?
But no, if we find out you're lying to us, things are going to get ugly. Officer, show him out.
So Colley is now faced with what? We have Mom, Kathleen Huckneby, who has an ironclad alibi but a literal $1 million motive. Then we have Scott Eastman, who has a confused alibi and a somewhat altered one, but it's too early to say which of these could work, so we will continue to put one foot in front of the other.
My focus is on this, Eco ATM now. There's all these little hidden cameras all over the thing that take pictures of you and video of you throughout the entirety of your transaction.
Gonzalez calls the Eco ATM people, who are extremely cooperative, and provides Gonzalez with a video that may be of some use. They review that tape, and there is Scott Eastman.
It was approximately maybe 5-6 hours before his father got murdered. He's at the kiosk selling this phone that he said doesn't exist, using an ID that he said he didn't have with him.
That was a big aha moment. Scott was going to these huge lengths to keep us from finding his cell phone. And, we just found it.
So now we know Scott Eastman is a liar, and we can prove it. Why is he lying? That phone is probably going to tell us why he's lying.
We immediately went to the Echo ATM, got permission to get inside of it.
Wouldn't it be nice, as they say in the song, to find Scott's phone in that machine?
Okay, we're here. How do we get into this thing?
The person at the other end from Eco ATM told me these buttons to press that are kind of hidden around it. The ATM pops open, and at the very bottom, there's just this bin. And there's all these phones at the bottom.
They have just like a mountain of cell phones. And basically, you go through every single phone, you figure out how many of them are this right make and model.
I was nervous because I didn't want us to take this drive out there and then it not be there. And I couldn't wait to get it back to the PD to download it.
Gonzalez races back to the station, does his magic on his computer.
Detective Gonzalez is the cell phone guru.
So the forensic software that we have will bring back deleted content. And the keyword search goes across Google searches, it goes across your text messages, it's going to search all those at the same time. The very first search I did was for the 22 long rifle bullet.
When Gonzalez reviews the search information, he sits back in his chair and says, well, my, Scotty, you naughty little boy. What have you been doing? Nothing good.
Check this out.
There was just hundreds of searches that just blew up on the screen for how do I get 22 ammunition? Is 22 long rifle lethal?
Scott Eastman is searching for Harrington and Richardson 22 revolvers in gun auction sites.
It just wasn't that Scott was searching about guns or just searching about ammo. For weeks, Scott Eastman was searching the exact ammo and the exact gun that killed his father.
After I found those, I typed in MOM for mom, and the keyword search just blew up. And there was just hundreds and hundreds of searches about incestuous pornography, or specifically about having sex with your stepmother.
We believed, and we had evidence from his phone, that Scott was in love with his stepmom. He was very affectionate to her. He had some of those gay photos on his own phone.
Scott Eastman apparently has a sexual fantasy about his stepmother. That's very, very strange.
That was like one of those true jaw-dropping moments, because I believe that he got it in his head that if Dad was eliminated, that they would have had his life insurance payout, and that would have made him one step closer to fulfilling whatever twisted fantasy he had about his stepmother.
So now they focus on the timeline of Eastman when he said he left his friend's house to return the family car.
Originally, Scott said that he left his friend's house because it was getting dark, and he parked the car and then came immediately back. When we verified that story with the father of one of his two friends, the father told us that Scott did leave, but he was gone for like a 45-minute period.
45 minutes. Are you sure?
Almost positive. I don't remember.
When we compared that to what Scott had told us, Scott made it close to where Scott was. It's in walking distance.
So what was Scott doing for most of those 45 minutes? Could it be that he was executing his own father? As Collie is considering all of this, he finally hears back from a neighbor that has a surveillance camera that covers the street in front of Eastman's home.
It took a while for us to get this video. It was on a street right off of Bigelow where this murder happened.
When you look at the video from that house, it shows that at 8:53, Scott parks. He exits the driver's seat, but he doesn't go west, which is where his friend's house was, which is where he said he had been. It's going back home to where his father was shot.
He's specifically told us that I didn't want to be seen by my dad because he would have made me stay in for the night. And he's literally on surveillance doing the exact thing he said he didn't do.
When he returns in the frame, he's coming from the direction of his own home. He opens the trunk of that car and probably concealed the weapon in the trunk of his car.
And that was the moment when everything else just kind of fell off to the side and we knew Scott was our shooter.
So Detective Colley calls in Scott Eastman for another interview. They would like to get a statement from him that he's responsible for this crime.
Scott knew nothing at this point that we had all these searches, and I started really showing him, like, you need to come clean.
I like you the best, and I know that you feel the best when you're being honest. It's not forced. You don't have to think about it.
And then I got very confrontational with him.
Tell me about those searches.
They show him a printout of his searches for 22 pistols, for ammunition, for what it'll do to a human body.
I remember he was looking down at the paper and he got this really tiny, meek little voice. And he just said,
"That came from my phone. Your phone gift." No.
I said, "You're like interviewing 101. Every time that you tell a lie, like your body language gets smaller and your voice gets weaker."
No, this isn't like randomness. It's all from the same phone that I recovered from the kiosk that you dropped your phone off at. Tell me what that means with it. I mean, who did? Who did? I don't know.
I think it really flustered him to attempt to make up these storylines on the spot.
So, I get it. That's not me. But the simple fact is that it is you.
I said, "I know that you murdered your father, and here's all the evidence to prove it."
There was a long pause, and Scott eventually just said, I need a lawyer.
Scott was told from the get, like, you're free to leave at any time.
Scott Eastman has walked out of this interview in the hope that everything is just going to disappear. The difference is, when everything is said and done, Scott Eastman is going to disappear into a prison. Colley and Gonzalez have the evidence required to pursue Eastman for the murder of his father. But they wanted to try for a statement, and it didn't happen. So now they will take the next logical step. They will apply for and receive a warrant for the arrest of Mr. Eastman for the murder of his father.
I assembled an arrest team to go arrest him at his house. We all went there in full gear. You start dealing with people inside of a house, and things can go bad really quick.
We're sitting in the living room, and all of a sudden, there is banging on the front door.
I'll get it.
My mom is next to me. I open the door an inch. And by the time I have it open an inch, we are pushed into the corner with policemen running into the house.
Kathleen, where's Scott? Get up. Your hands.
He stands up calmly. He's like, I'm right here. And they read him his rights and they handcuff him. And I remember hearing them say,
Scott Eastman, you're under arrest for the murder of Relis Carl Eastman III.
I didn't know how to react. I'm thinking, they gotta be wrong. It's not possible that Scott would do this to us. It's not possible for Scott to have shot our own dad.
When it comes to murder, nothing is impossible, my dear.
Scott, he goes willingly. There's no issue. And Colley is talking to Kathleen. And one thing I remember very vividly is Colley saying, you know he's in love with you.
I told Kathleen he murdered his own father thinking that you two were going to run off into the sunset. And the look on her face was bizarre, like, almost like, wow, did he really say that about me?
And I just thought about how that was kind of like an odd reaction.
What I believe occurred on June 25th of 2016 is Scott did park his car on the next street over. Scott then casually walked to his house and was
don't lie to me. If I catch you doing drugs, you are out of here. Do you understand me?
I think Relis turned and just walked back into his kitchen because he knew who the person was. And I don't think Relis saw that as a threat.
Scott waited for his opportunity, and when Relis walked toward the kitchen, Scott came up behind him with a .22 caliber revolver.
Scott fired that weapon, and one of the projectiles hit Relis in the back of the head. And then based on surveillance, Scott then ran out of the house, back the way he came. He stopped briefly at the car, and I believe that Scott broke open the top of that revolver. And if you break those open too fast, the casings will go everywhere, which one of them was later found in the spare tire area of that car.
Colley and Gonzalez believe this is how the incident transpired. And when they take Mr. Eastman to trial, the jury finds Scott Eastman guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the murder of his father. As a result of that finding, a judge sentences Scott Eastman to 55 years to life in the California penal system for this homicide.
Kathleen was never arrested or charged with anything because there was no evidence that linked her to the murder.
As far as the insurance money was split equally between Eastman's children, aside from the murderous one, of course.
I could not conceive of that type of violence. For Scott to pull a trigger, killing his father, it was not something that was anywhere in my imagination.
For him to take our father away from us, it's a horrid thing. Because I won't have my dad to walk me down the aisle. I won't have him to meet the grandkids. I won't have him. I won't have my own dad.
Over those weeks investigating Relis Eastman's murder, I came to really see what a good-hearted man he was. I was proud to play a part in getting justice for Relis.
Relis Eastman brought Scott into the world. And 21 years later, Scott takes Relis out of it. Something profoundly wrong with that. But murder always is.